Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Guru Deva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vedya Ravinam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Would you flip that switch behind you, please? It's going to get chilly now that the sun has gone down. So we are still in our 7th chapter. Who is chanting this evening?
I don't have my text with me yet.
Yeah,
so
I can chant you.
thanks.
Thank you. And where are we?
We're on number 180 in chapter 7.
Chapter 7, shloka 180.
Anapannutyalokastad indrajalam idam tviti janantyevannapannutya bhogam mayatpadhistatha. People know a magical show to be unreal, but this knowledge does not involve the destruction of the show. So it is possible to know the unreality of external objects without causing their disappearance or the cessation of enjoyment from them.
Yes. So the idea here that he's been working on is, does the person of steady wisdom, do they perceive the world? Do they enjoy the world? Excuse me. So you can go to the movies. That's our modern day version of this. You can see a movie and you know it's unreality. That doesn't keep you from enjoying it, nor do you get confused. So also, in the state of nirvikalpa samadhi, which is a mind state, there's no perception of the individuality, there's no perception of the phenomenal world. That way it is like deep sleep, except there's still one vritti there, and that's avidya, ignorance itself. There's still all the mind rolled up into the unmanifest. Samadhi, even that is gone. There's just the luminosity of I. Then when the mind returns, it's conditioned by this experience. But what Vidyaranya is saying here, that's not the end point. it is in some ways the doorway to sahaja samadhi, natural or continuous samadhi. In that state, the phenomenal world is seen, but known to not be real. So, what does this allow us to do? Take it easy. Know that the body, mind, intellect is going to do what it's going to do. It's prarabdha. What I experience as an agent, if I do, is nothing but guna and karma. There's no person there, an individuality. And I ever stand, the word that Vidyaranya has used so frequently, kutastha, still like a mountain, watching in the now. Incredible intensity of the play of the infant. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
यत्र त्वस्य जगत्स्वात्मा पश्येत् कस्तत्र केनकं किं जिघ्रोत् किं वदेत् एति किं जिघ्रेत् किं वदेत् इति श्रुतौ तु बहुघोषितम्. Doubt. The Shruti passages say that he who perceives his own self to be all, what can he hear or see or smell or speak?
So here the doubter is taking the scripture passage literalistically. And again, there are post-enlightenment samadhis. For some, where the perception of the world is barely there. But that's not how Vidyaranya is going to unfold this scripture passage. Let's see what he does. Next verse.
Tena dvaitam pahnutya. Tena dvaitam apahnyutya. Vidyodeti na chanyatha tatana. Vidusho bhoga katham syaditi chet. Therefore, knowledge arises with the destruction of duality and in no other way. This being so, how can the knower of truth enjoy the objective world?
So here's the objector still. So the idea here is that for the knower of truth, the world is no longer perceived. Therefore, he no longer enjoys the world. Does he sit like a lump on a log? Now, there have been saints that to some degree do that. The one that pops into my mind is Anandamayi Ma. She didn't teach. She didn't do anything except glow. Sometimes she talk and teach, sing. Very little activity. But then the scriptures are replete with Mahatmas who are very active. Of course, we always read about King Janaka. Vidyaranya himself, Swamiji. Let's go on and see how Vidyaranya resolves this doubt.
Sushupti Vishaya Mukti Vishaya va Shrutistviti Uktam Swapyaya Sampatya Iti Sutta Shriti Sputam. The reply, the Shruti upon which this objection is based applies to the states of deep sleep and final liberation. This has been amply cleared in aphorism 4416 in the Brahma Sutras.
Okay, I must confess, I have not studied the Brahma Sutras, so I can't respond to that. But here he's talking about deep sleep where you know nothing, final liberation. Here he means videha moksha, liberation beyond the body. I would include also the mind state of nirvikalpa. But let's see what else he says. Going on.
Anyatha yajnavalkyad. Anyatha yajnavalkyad. Egachar. Egacharyatvam. Egacharyatvam na sambhavet. Dvaita drishtavavidvatta. Dvaita drishtavnavagvadet. If this is not accepted, we cannot account for Yajnavalkya's and other sages' efforts to teach. Without a recognition of duality, they could not teach, and with it, their knowledge is incomplete.
So, does it mean all the gurus are men of incomplete knowledge or women of incomplete knowledge? Of course not. So I simplify it this way. There are two kinds of adhyasa symbolized by snake in the rope and mirage waters in the desert. When I imagine the snake on the rope and I investigate the rope, the snake is no longer available for perception. Oh, that's so weird. I thought it was a snake, but it's a rope. It's so obvious it's a rope. That is like samadhi. But mirage waters in the desert, before knowledge, my senses report water and my knowledge is water. I keep driving along the road in the desert and I see the mirage recede and I realize, oh, it's a mirage. My senses continue to report to me what looks like water. But my knowledge is sand. Now, sense perception is incredibly powerful. Sound had told us about the exhibit she went to in New York, a virtual reality, where the floor and the ceiling were mirrored. Were you all here when she talked about that? Yes, no?
No.
No, okay. So, because of the mirror on the ceiling and on the floor, it looked like there was this deep chasm that went on to infinity. There was a reflection inside of a reflection inside of a reflection inside of a reflection. It's an optical illusion. Now, she knew the floor was solid, probably a concrete floor that somebody put mirrored glass over. But she said it was really creepy trying to step out onto that floor. Her knowledge was a solid floor, but her senses reported she'd fall into this infinite well. Such is the power of sense perception, which is why these moments when the mind stops even if it's only for a few seconds, can be so valuable, because they prove to us the unreality of the individual and the unreality of the phenomenal world. Then when the mind returns, I'm not fooled by sense perception. Next verse.
निर्विकल्प समाधौ तु द्वैतादर्शन हेतुतः सैवापरोक्ष विद्येति चेत् सुषुप्तिस्तथा न किम्. Doubt. Direct knowledge is achieved in subject-objectless contemplation in which there is no duality. Reply. Then why not apply the same argument to the state of deep sleep?
So here, Vidyaranya is saying that nirvikalpa samadhi he's applying the same logic to deep sleep. What deep sleep will reveal is the perception of the world, and the perception of the individual is dependent on the functioning mind. But what it doesn't reveal is I am Brahman. I don't know where Vidyaranya is going to go with this. In Vivekachudamani, Shankara says to practice nirvikalpa samadhi. Where I have come to after years of this work, don't worry too much about nirvikalpa samadhi. Make knowledge your goal, not the mind state of nirvikalpa. What Shankara implies is when all the vasanas have been exhausted, the mind will go into nirvikalpa. So focus on that. Now, there are schools of Vedanta which posit that nirvikalpa is not necessary. I am neutral on this. Make knowledge of yourself your objective, not the mind state of nirvikalpa. Do you know who you are? That's the point. Any thoughts on this? I can only share with you out of my own direct experience. This one's mind slipped into nirvikalpa in 1977, and nothing has been the same since. So I tend to teach based on my own direct experience. But I can't say that it's necessary for everybody. It's certainly useful. Next verse.
आत्मतत्त्वं न जानाति सुप्तो यदि तदा त्वया आत्मधीरेव विद्येति वाच्यं न द्वैतविस्मृतिः. Doubt. In the state of deep sleep, there is no knowledge of the self. Reply. Then you admit that it is not mere absence of duality, but the knowledge of the self that really matters.
Yes. So we have what the scriptures call fleeting samadhis all the time. The way it's framed in Tripura Rahasyam, you've got Prakasha, the light of pure awareness, and you've got Vimarsha, the deliberation of the mind. remove the vimarsha, and all that's left is the prakasha. But when these momentary samadhis, these fleeting samadhis happen, if the attentive faculty is turned outward, Jim, where did you go? I don't know. I was spacing out. That's all you get. But if the attentive faculty is turned within and the mind has been prepared by the paroksha jnana, the indirect knowledge revealed through the scripture, then when everything vanishes, mind returns. It is conditioned. What it reveals is knowledge of myself. So here Vidyaranya is saying exactly what I said a few minutes ago. Make your objective knowledge of your own nature. Don't worry too much about mind states. If you still have doubts, keep doing tapas. Let go, let go. Anybody have any comments on this? Next verse.
उभयं मिलितं विद्या यदि तर्हि घटादयः अर्धविद्या भाजिनः स्युः सकलद्वैतविस्मृतेः. Doubt. True knowledge combines in itself both the knowledge of self and the absence of knowledge of duality. Reply. Then inanimate objects like pots in which the knowledge of duality is absent are already half enlightened.
I'm not sure I agree with his answer. Read the whole verse again.
Doubt. True knowledge combines in itself both the knowledge of self and the absence of knowledge of duality. Reply. Then inanimate objects like pots in which the knowledge of duality is absent are already half enlightened.
Oh, yes, because a pot does not see the phenomenal world. I think that's a little bit spurious on Vidyaranya's part. Let's see what else he says. Going on.
मशकध्वनिमुख्यानां विक्षेपाणां बहुत्वतः तव विद्या तथा न स्यात् घटादीनां यथा दृढा. Then the pots are superior to you, for even the buzzing of mosquitoes often distracts your attention, and they have no such awareness of duality.
Yes. So the mosquitoes distract your attention. They must be half enlightened too, because they have no awareness of duality. I don't know what mosquitoes are experiencing. He's trying to be funny. But where he's going with this, it's not about the disappearance of the world necessarily. It's the knowledge that I am Brahman and that Jaganmithya, the phenomenal world, is illusory. To destroy the world does not mean it's non-perception. It means to see it for what it is. Now, listen very carefully. Many people have an intellectual understanding of this. And because they study parts of the scripture like this, which are implying that we need not disappear the world, all we need to do is have the information the world isn't real. My sense is that's usually not enough. That in fact, the world still continues to afflict people. They still get identified with a personal sense of self. And then they get what I call the Vedanta logic loop. Doesn't matter if I'm identified, that's just a mind state. Doesn't matter if I'm upset, I'll just hit people because it's all an illusion. And that's not freedom. It's not freedom. Let's see what else he says. Going on.
आत्मधीरेव विद्येति यदि तर्हि सुखी भव दृष्टचित्तं निरुन्ध्यां चेत् niruddham tvam yatha sukham. If, however, you admit the knowledge of the self alone constitutes realization, you have accepted our position. Again, if you say to have realization, the troubling mind is to be controlled, we bless you. Be happy, do control the mind.
So what Vidyaranya is implying here, the mark of the man of wisdom or the woman of wisdom, is they have given up control of the mind. It's not about huffing and puffing and trying to stop the mind into some state of quiescence. Here Vidyaranya says, knock yourself out. That's what you want to do. We bless you. Go for it and do it. Mark of the person of steady wisdom is there's no longer kartavya, obligatory action. Struggle. Now again, I can only share with you out of my own sadhana. When I would go be with Swamiji, and I would tune in to his mind, he was so empty. On the surface, there was vyavahara going on. He'd be talking or reading or writing or doing things. But if you tuned into what was behind, there's this vast emptiness. So empty. That's a very real experience. Is it a mind state? Yeah. Next verse.
तदिष्टमेष्टया माया मयत्वस्य समीक्षणात् इच्छन्नपज्ञवन्नेच्छत् किमिच्छन्निति हि श्रुतम्. We also like it, for the control of the mind is essential for the realization of the illusory character of the world. But although the wise man may have desires, they are not binding as are the desires of an ignorant man. This is the drift of the text, desiring, it's some quote, desiring what?
Yes.
Something.
So, what is the practice to be done? The practice to be done is mature vairagya, sannyasa. What is the cause of my suffering? It's the spriha, it's the longing. Surface part of the mind moves through the world, enjoys what comes naturally, does not grieve what doesn't come, also is not afflicted by various mind states. Get up in the morning and you've got, flu symptoms. You feel crappy. It's just a mind state. No problem. It passes. We come to satsang. We revel in the halls of Vedanta, get screaming high. It passes. But you know whether or not you know who you are. I go back again to Gita, probably my favorite verse in the Gita. When a person casts off all the desires of the mind, old Partha, has no relationship with them, and is satisfied in the self by the self, then is said to be a person of steady wisdom. I think that sums it up. Well, let's go on and see what else Vidyaranya says on it.
Rago lingamabodhasya santuragadaya budhe iti shastradvayam sartham evam satya virodhata. There is therefore no contradiction between the two statements in the scriptures that desires are a sign of ignorance and that the wise man may have desires, because the desires of a wise man are too weak to bind.
Yes. So I like to use the term preferences versus insistence. The desires of the ignorant person are rooted in, I'll be happy when, it'll be better if. Yoga Vasishta has a wonderful image. There's a person standing on the bank of the river in the hot season, and he's roasted from head to foot. But another person is out in the river, up to his shoulders. And the sun still beats down upon his head and the top of his shoulders. But under the water, he's cool. So always for the jnani, inside, shunya, empty. Next verse.
Jagan mithyatva vatsvatma sangat basya samikshanat kasya kamayeti vacho bhoktatra bhava bhoktra bhava vivikshaya. Since he is convinced of the associationlessness of the self, like the illusoriness of the world, the knower has no idea of himself as a doer and enjoyer. The verse quoted at the beginning of this chapter, for whom should he desire, applies to him.
Yes. So He understands the illusory nature of the world. Use the same phrase, Jagan Mithya. The names and forms are illusory. Don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff. Don't worry. And this vast, wonderful Leela of the infinite. Your body, mind, intellect is not separate from it. The language that Jesus used, I myself do no thing. It is the Father within that doeth the work. Gone is the sense of doership. Two ideas you can use. I do nothing. I simply stand back and witness, and the infinite does it all. Or I do everything. The one that gets us in trouble is I, Jim, do these specific actions and not those. Next verse.
Patijayaadikam sarvam tattadbhogayane chhati kintvatmabhogarthamiti shrutva bahu. Many Shruti texts declare that a husband loves his wife not for her sake, and the wife loves him not for his sake, but for their own sake.
So here he's talking about how for the man or woman of wisdom, they understand where happiness is. The foolish person says, I love my wife or I love my husband. But the person of knowledge says, my spouse causes my mind to stop. Krishna, Krishna. The fool goes to the concert and says, oh, the music is what does it to me. The person of wisdom knows, I go to the concert proud of them. If the music conforms to my subjective card file of what beauty is, oh, that stopped my mind. That's all that happens. Desire, object of desire become one. We get a taste, a kiss of the bliss. The ignorant person dances with the world, eats the chocolate. Oh, I love chocolate. The jnani eats the same chocolate. Stop. So the objects no longer have the power to bind. We've given up all the silly ideas that my desires are somehow special. There is no such thing as worldly pleasure as opposed to bliss. In the end, that's a false distinction. There is no such thing as worldly pleasure. The only sukham is the self. I either experience it directly, immediately, that Atmaramana, or I experience it in a mediated way through the medium of an object of the senses. Knowing this, the phenomenal world no longer has the power to bind. Next verse.
किं कूटस्थचिदाभासः अथवा किं वो भयात्मकः भोक्ता तत्र न कूटोऽस्थ असङ्गत्वात् भोक्तृतां व्रजेत्. Now, who is the doer and the enjoyer? Is it the immutable Kutastha or the reflected consciousness Chidabhasa, or a union of the two? Kutastha cannot be the enjoyer since it is associationless.
Yes. So here Vidyaranya reminds us the enjoyer, the experiencer, the doer is not the self. Kutastha. It is Chidabhasa, it's the mind. That function in the subtle intellect, the karta. Here he calls it Chidabhasa, the reflection of consciousness caught in the web of thought, Swamiji used to say. And what he's going to say is, don't take it as real. Don't think it's important. No personal sense of self is real. You can't think a real thought. I have no thoughts or feelings of my own. It's just traffic going by. Next verse.
Sukha-dukha-bhimanakyo vikaro bhoga uchyate kutasthaschha vikari chet ye tanna pyahatam katham. Enjoyment signifies the change that results from identification with the sensations of pleasure and pain. If the immutable Kutastha is the enjoyer, it becomes mutable, then would it not be self-contradictory?
Yes. So again, we have these three words that we use to point to the self. Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat, pure existence. Chit, pure awareness. Ananda, bliss absolute. And many of us think it's a euphoric state. Because euphorias come and go. They cannot be the nature of the self, which is Kutastha, unchanging. But we call the self bliss absolute. And for beginners, I like to define it as no sorrow reaches there. Physical pain gets to my body, emotional turmoil gets to my mind, doubt and confusion gets to my intellect. But I'm like the center of the cyclone. Nothing nothing touches me. Well, then why do we call it Ananda? Because of the nature of the mind. The mind craves something. It is a pleasure seeker, pain avoider mechanism. It's always looking for the good. Its only real doubt is I don't know what good is. Every good of this world seems to be tinged with sorrow. I love so and so, then they died. Gone. Now I suffer because I love them. But what the ancients realized is when the mind ceases its projecting power, its jonesing, its yearning, and understands that because the self is bliss absolute, we can define it as the wellspring of joy, the fountainhead of joy. When the mind can come home to the self, the mind is blissful, which is what it craves. St. Augustine framed it this way: Thou hast made us for thyself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it finds its rest in thee. It's a God-shaped hole in my heart. The little things of this world are just too small. But thank God, God is the most beloved. And it's my very self. Kudasta. And there's no end to how deeply the mind can revel in the self. It gets richer and richer and richer. Very important point. Vivekachudamani, Shankara frames it in that beautiful verse about the qualifications of the fit guru, who says, first of all, Shrotriyam, well versed in the scriptures, a full knower of the Supreme, who has retired into the Supreme, who is unafflicted by desire, who is as calm as a fire that has burned up its fuel. Beautiful poetry. Next verse.
Vikari buddhyadhiratvad abhaso vikrtavapi niradhisthana vibhranti kevalana hitisthati. Chidabhasa is subject to the changing conditions of the intellect and undergoes modifications. But Chidabhasa, being illusory, exists only by virtue of its real substratum, and therefore cannot by itself be the enjoyer.
Yes. Oh, this is interesting. So Chidabhasa, this Jivabhasana, this reflection of intellect in the intellect, the reflection of the self in the intellect, the reflection of consciousness, it goes through the modifications of joys and sorrows. But can it be the enjoyer because it's fundamentally illusory? And its substratum is the kutastha, meaning what is ego? Ego is the direct experience of the self, and in the mind, I superimpose all this nonsense. But I don't superimpose all this nonsense on my foot. I superimpose it on the self. Atman is the very substratum of your sense of ego. This is why, if we study Vedanta and we make the self some objective idea, what do you think about the self? Well, this is what I think about the self, as if it's something that hovers above us. It does us no good. We must start with our direct experience. Who sees the phone? I do. That's yourself. It can't be the self, Jim, because I'm a miserable creature. Start with your direct experience. Do you exist? Yeah. It's you. Okay. Now, who are you really? And by discriminating, I cast off from my identity the thoughts. And that Chidabhasa falls. There is Chidakasha, the space of pure awareness. Next verse.
उभयात्मक एवातो लोके भोक्ता निगद्यते तादृगात्मानमारभ्य कूटस्थहेषिते श्रुतौ. In common parlance, therefore, Chidabhasa in conjunction with Kutastha is considered to be the enjoyer. But the Shruti begins with both the types of self and concludes that Kutastha alone remains.
Yes. So in the beginning, even Shankara will ask us to make discrimination between the self and the not self. But in the end, he says, guess what? We lied. There's no such thing as a not self. This world and everything in it comes about sankalpena, by means of imagination. There's nothing real. If you dream you're riding your motorcycle and you decide to turn left instead of right, when you awaken, all of it was imagination. Next verse.
Atma katama ityukte Yajnavalkyo vibodhayan Vijnanamayam asangam tam paryasheshayat. When King Janaka asked when King Janaka asked Yajnavalkya about the nature of the self, the sage first told him of the sheath of intellect, and then pointing out its inadequacy to be the self, ended in teaching him of the immutable Kutastha.
Yes, so here he's quoting the story of Janaka and Yajnavalkya. And the idea here is the subtle intellect, the Vijnanamaya Kosh, which has embedded in it what we call, or what Shankara calls, karta, the sense of doership, the coordinating mechanism. So I went up to Piedmont Cafe for lunch. I had an omelet. I came back. I listened to some news this afternoon. Vinayak did none of those things. What was it that was different and that made those choices and coordinated all that activity? It is a function in the subtle intellect. But it's not real. It's one of those things that is imagined in consciousness. No different than the sense of doership in the dream. Just as imaginary. Next verse.
Koyamatmetyamado Koyamatmetyevamado Sarvatratmavicharatah Ubhayatmakamarabhya Kutastha Shrutau. In fact, Aitareya and other Shruti texts concerned with the consideration of the self begin with an enquiry into the nature of the enjoyer and end in a description of the immutable Kutastha.
Yes. So he's again referencing scripture where the inquiry is into who is the enjoyer, the bhokta, the karta, the doer, and seeing the fundamental difference between that reflection of consciousness and the real self. Now, to simplify, I like the slogan, if I think I'm a person, I'm deluded. I'm moving through the world and I'm identified with this doer, this enjoyer. I'm going to be in trouble. Stop. Step back. Get out. Let go of any personal sense of self. We're back to Viveka Vairagya. Those first two qualifications of a fit student. What is Viveka? That firm conviction in the intellect that Brahman alone is real. The self is real. The phenomenal world is mithya. What do I do with that? Vairagya, that desire to give up attachment to all experiences gained through the senses and all forms of self, all personal sense of self, starting with the body and up to some sort of woo-woo being, whatever I may come up with. That's the work. Next verse.
कूटस्थ सत्यतां स्वस्मिन् नध्यस्यात्मा विवेकतः तात्विकीं भोक्तृतां मत्वा न कदाचिज्जिहासति. Owing to ignorance, the enjoyer superimposes the reality of Kutastha onto himself. Consequently, he considers his enjoyment to be real and does not want to give it up.
Yes. So the scriptures use the term anyonya adhyasa, which means mutual superimposition. So the first superimposition is I superimpose the body, the feelings, and the thoughts onto the self. But the other superimposition onto the world, I attribute a separate existence. Sat, Vinayak is over there. Chit, he has sentience and consciousness, different and separate from mine. Ananda, I really like this man. I even want to hang out with him. I superimpose my ananda onto the world. Truth. Sarvam kalvidam brahma. It's all Brahma. Jagan Mithya. All the names and forms are inherently void. Shunyata. Dance. Go ahead. It's okay. Just don't take it seriously. Okay, one more.
भोक्ता स्वस्यैव भोगाय पतिजायादिमिच्छति एष लौकिक वृत्तान्तः कृत्या सम्यग् अनुदितः. The enjoyer desires to have a wife and so forth for his own pleasures. This popular notion has been well described in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad.
So the enjoyer wants stuff, people, places, things, and conditions in order to enjoy them. That's the natural person. That natural person doesn't have desires that are much different than a dog. Let's see what happens. Next verse. Do one more.
Bhogyanam bhoktasheshatva anma bhogyeshva nurujyatam anma bhogyeshva nurujyatam bhoktyeva pradhaneto nuragam tam vidhitsati. The Shruti says that since the enjoyable objects are for the sake of the enjoyer, they should not be loved for their own sake. Since the enjoyer is the central factor, love should be given to him.
Yes. So you hear in modern psychobabble, I'm learning to love myself. And they think that means take bubble baths, go get a massage. Don't be around people who are downers. Oh, if only people would really love themselves. What the scriptures say is, I think I love the objects, but I love the people, places, things, and conditions because of the pleasure they give me. And in fact, the pleasure they give me is a taste of myself. Oh, I love so and so. And then that person turns out to be an awful human being. I don't like him anymore. Why? He doesn't give me pleasure anymore. That's what happens. It's never in the objects. Again, the objects of the world are not bad. You hear this language, disgust for worldly pleasures. In the beginning, what we need to do, I don't know, I don't even like that part of that language. I would prefer to say, see the world for what it is, which is inherently neutral. We develop mature vairagya, not from some notion of how bad the world is, but through insight. When the scriptures say we have an awareness of the doshas, the defects of the world, it doesn't mean, oh, I thought that was pleasurable and it's really disgusting. No, it means I see the inherent limitation of pleasure in the world. It's always small. It's always short-lived. It's always changing. The more attached I get to it, the more pain it gives me when it changes or disappears. That gives us the insight to let it go. Okay, we'll stop here. What verse are we on for next week?
We are on 203.
Oh, I forgot to tell you all. I have family coming to town next week on the 6th. We will have no class on the 6th. No class on the 6th, no class on the 7th, no class on the 8th. So I will put that in an email to everybody. If one of you would be so kind as to put that on the WhatsApp, I'd appreciate it. All right. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari